As a globalist, I believe that the globalization of the industrial sector will make the world a better place. But before that, I'll explain to you what globalism really is. Globalism is a belief in the ever freer movement of goods, services, capital, and people around the globe. Another definition of globalism is that it is a shared set of social, lifestyle, and political norms, along with supranational institutions that embody them, that explicitly supersede all national norms and institutions. Now that we have grasped an idea of globalism, I will now explain to you the advantages of globalizing the industrial sector. As I have said, I believe that globalization has the potential to make this world a better place to live in. It could solve some of the deep-seated problems like unemployment and poverty. I will be telling you about 5 advantages that comes with globalization. First advantage. Globalization represents free trade which promotes global economic growth, creates jobs, makes companies more competitive, and lowers prices for consumers. Second advantage. It provides poor countries through infusions of foreign capital and technology with the chance to develop economically, and by spreading prosperity, creates the conditions in which democracy and respect for human rights may flourish. This is an ethereal goal which hasn't been achieved in most countries. Third advantage. With globalization, we would share financial interests in which corporations and governments would try to sort out ecological problems for each other. Fourth advantage. Labor can move from country to country to market their skills. Fifth advantage. Globalization would give us countries the ability to agree to free trade agreements like NAFTA, South Korea Chorus, and the TPP. These are the key advantages in which I believe would make this world a better place.
Nationalism has made a major contribution to global governance through our system of nation-states. Nationalism has been called an ideology, a sentiment, a culture, or even a social movement that pertains to nations. In many ways, nationalism is the foundation of modern society and social solidarity. It is often used by politicians to promote national unity and patriotism. As a nationalist, I will promote nationalism by stating the disadvantages of globalization to industries. First, local businesses, handloom industry, cottage and small-scale industry suffered a lot due to globalization. The highly specialized and efficient multinational companies take advantages of large-scale production and put products at throwaway prices. The local industries could not compete with their global counterparts. Second, globalization has caused specialization of labor. On one hand, there is an increase in demand for skilled laborers. However, it has caused enough disadvantages for the unskilled labor group. There are few employment opportunities for unskilled laborers in a global environment. And lastly, globalization is responsible for the emergence of large number of multinational companies. Very often, it is found that they do not provide good working conditions to the workers. Further, forests have been cut for setting up large industries. The industrial discharges have widely contributed towards environmental degradation.
We live in a world that is highly interconnected by a bewildering array of complex economic transactions, social and environmental problems, and international political collaborations and conflicts. In particular, in times of almost unlimited globalization, permanent changes regarding the trade balance are a decisive factor. Causes and interactions are seemingly as limitless as the world market. In order to take a look at the bigger picture, detailed analysis allows shedding light on crucial aspects. Foreign trade figures illustrate the extent to which this is happening, measured from the ratio of foreign trade in goods and services to GDP. From 1991 to 2014, it has almost doubled from 45.2 to 84.8%. Today, goods are made and sold all over the world. Thanks to globalization, we can exchange goods, money, and ideas faster and cheaper than ever before. Because of globalization, it gives us, the traders, a larger market where we can sell more goods and make more money. Also, customers can also benefit from this because products become cheaper and they can get new goods quickly. Of course, it also has disadvantages for us traders. Globalization brings competition between other traders. Resources of underdeveloped countries are exploited by developed countries. Poor trade unions and lack of control over country economy by its government. Globalization is a complex issue, with some argue that reduces global poverty. Others argue that it actually increases wealth inequality worldwide.
Globalization and the process of integrating national economies on a worldwide basis have created a global exchange of agricultural commodities and goods in the belief that the path to peace and prosperity is through the marketplace. Aided by the information and communication technologies, there has been an increased linkage and concentration at almost all stages of the food production and marketing chain. As an industrial farmer, I will give you some advantage and disadvantage of industrial agriculture in a globalizing world. The benefits of industrial farming is that we can have a faster food production than before. With the use of technologies and machines, it will be easier and faster. In industrial agriculture, our food will also become cheaper and also benefits to those who have low-income jobs. But the development of industrial agri-food production on a global scale affects the local government and economies, often ceding fundamental sovereignty as the regional agricultural production becomes increasingly subject to larger international entities. Unable to compete due to their unequal diminished ability to participate in markets, many local food producers are forced to obey by the demands of larger, foreign, international entities whose regard for local tradition and customs are rarely considered. This situation leads to marginalization of local producer, economic dislocation, rural to urban migration, and the inability of governments to properly regulate capital flows and enforce environmental protection.
On behalf of everyone who make up the civil society, I believe that globalizing the industrial sector both have positive and negative impacts on the organizations and other aspects as well. Allow me to discuss these impacts that affect the individuals in the society and the organizations. First and foremost, civil society is used in the sense of the aggregate of non-governmental institutions that manifest interests and will of citizens. The well-being of the individuals and the conditions of our organizations are our main concerns. Globalization has enabled free flow of labor where firms were able to recruit the best talents in the world without boundaries. Sadly, there are other cases that occurred. Globalization has led to the exploitation of labor. Multinational corporations are accused of social injustice, unfair working conditions, lack of concern for the environment, and even environmental degradation. Another problem is the fall in employment growth rate. Third, trade unions have become weaker in negotiating better pay and security for workers as only efficient labor is absorbed by the profit-driven enterprises. On the other hand, there is an increase in employment opportunities where companies are setting up businesses in other countries. As a result of globalization, people have access to the best quality of goods and services throughout the world, which is great news for the consumers.
As a government official, I will explain to you the advantages and disadvantages of globalization in the industrial sector in a government official's point of view. First, let's talk about the advantages. Globalization represents free trade, which promotes economic growth not just for our country, but for the whole world as well. It creates jobs, makes companies more competitive, and lowers prices for consumers. One of the advantages of globalization of the industrial sector is the licensing, or removal of government restrictions on industries and liberalization of foreign investments. This reduced the time and money spent in formal procedures for obtaining approvals from the government. This has shifted the focus of enterprises to the actual business of production, thus lowering project costs. Also, experts have increased, so also has the volume of work. And I believe that globalization of the industrial sector helps solve some deep-seated problems like unemployment and poverty in our country. But unfortunately, there are also disadvantages of the globalization of the industrial sector. One of it is the rising urban industrial wages are much higher than the rural wages, which leads to disparity in incomes for our citizens.
Globalization is a force that shapes our contemporary world, affecting businesses, environment, and society. Suppliers, corporations, and consumers are linked by information, material, and capital flows as production processes and industries become increasingly dispersed around the globe. As a business person, I will present to you the advantages and disadvantages of globalization and industrial businesses. From the business perspective, one effect of globalization is that of expanded markets. This means that a business that previously only sold its goods domestically can start selling products to other countries. One example of expanded markets include the auto industry. Countries that were under the influence of communism
only had access to cars produced domestically, but when communism fell, Western economies expanded their markets to former communist markets. This in turn increased their profit potential. Another advantage is the access to cheaper resources. Many companies in the United States produce their goods either domestically or in areas with slightly less expensive labor. When China opened its market to the rest of the world, however, American companies were able to take advantage of the far cheaper labor. This is called outsourcing. And generally, international development arises out of a combination of both expanded markets as well as cheaper resources. A prime example is India, which before the 90s, the information technology industry in India was underdeveloped. However, coupled with educated yet cheap labor, foreign companies were able to build technology industries in its major cities. This technological know-how spread to local firms who in turn grew as a result of expanded markets in both in India as well as the rest of the world. Negatively, globalization has led to fluctuation in price. Due to increasing competition, business firms in developed countries are forced to lower their prices for their products. China, for example, produced goods at a much lower cost than other countries, which lead other firms and organizations in other parts of the world to lower their prices to maintain customer satisfaction and loyalty. This is a negative effect as it reduces the ability to sustain social welfare. In developed countries, the risk of job insecurity is increasing. Globalization has led to firms outsourcing their job to developing countries with lower wages in order to manufacture products at a cheaper rate. Possible in countries like China and India, this leads to lesser jobs in developed countries.
As an ICT expert, I will explain to you what are the disadvantages, advantages, and the impact of industrial globalization on information and communication technologies. But first, let us get the definition of information communication technologies. They are basically an electronic-based system of information, reception, processing, and retrieval, which has changed the way we live and the environment where we live in. Globalizing ICTs can offer developing countries opportunities to change educational systems. Through the years, the technology has changed the education system. Most people back then have had trouble looking for information, but nowadays, massive amounts of information can be accessed with a single touch through the internet. It improves how we make and execute laws. ICTs widen the opportunities for aspiring businesses. Cell phones are almost vital to a business since they are lifelines for staying in touch of your business when on the road and/or responding to inquiries in a fast manner. Marketing is essential in a business and can be easily done through social media or a website. It also creates opportunities for the poor. Cell phones offer access to medical information, otherwise inaccessible to impoverished people, and also offer access to information and give the opportunity to make their voices heard. It can be used to easily access global knowledge and communicate with other people from all across the world. Unfortunately, ICTs are mostly only available in major parts of countries and are very limited. ICTs are expensive and most people cannot afford even basic ones. The unequal distribution of ICTs may further contribute to the marginalization of poor countries compared to developed ones. Without ICTs in poor countries, they can be treated as insignificant simply because they have no ability to communicate with the outside.